The world is at war, a state of ongoing conflict. Over 100 conflicts rage globally across the world today. We track markets and carefully read headlines. The true story isn't simply in tank movements or trade tariffs alone. It's the silence of a desert night, a powerful story etched on a mother's weary face who somehow survived. The 21st century was supposed to be about connectivity and unity. Instead, it's division. Armed conflict is the greatest global risk. The failure of peace is most devastating and apparent in Sudan, which the UN rightfully calls catastrophic and utterly dire. This devastating war is often missed by mainstream media. This is the terrible human cost of collapse. Millions are displaced.
They report the chaos. We reveal the agenda.
Maka Ibrahim Mohammed. She is just 18 years old, a refugee in Chad, one of the 878,000 Sudanese who fled across the border. When her child decided to enter the world, Maka was hours away from medical help. Her uterus ruptured. The agony was so extreme, she became delirious. The 2-hour journey to the hospital in Meche was not on a paved road. It was a brutal, bone-shaking ride over a dirt track. It was a race for 2 lives that had already been deemed expendable by the world. It took emergency surgery to save Maka and her tiny son, Muaz. Today Muaz is still fighting, fed enriched milk through a syringe in a malnutrition ward that is overflowing with tiny bodies. Maka's story is a single pinprick in a staggering statistic. 14.3 million people have been displaced by the fighting in Sudan, the largest displacement crisis globally. The suffering goes beyond hunger and physical wounds. It is psychological, a scar on the very foundation of childhood. Afaf Abdulmalik, a woman who once held a comfortable government job, fled after her brother-in-law was killed in front of his own family. Her young niece witnessed the murder. Today, that niece is constantly reliving the trauma. Afaf says the girl will still freeze instantly if she sees a man on a motorbike, the transport used by the paramilitary forces that committed the atrocity. The war has literally rewired her nervous system. This is the emotional toll the headlines never mention: anxiety, betrayal, and the loss of the most fundamental thing, the hope of safety. The humanitarian crisis in Sudan is a complex and devastating situation, marked by widespread displacement, violence, and a severe lack of essential resources. Millions of Sudanese have been forced to flee their homes due to the ongoing conflict between the Sudanese armed forces and the Rapid Support Forces. As of December 2024, over 11 million people were internally displaced within Sudan, while approximately 4 million have sought refuge in neighboring countries like Chad, South Sudan, and Egypt. The crisis has disproportionately affected women and children, who constitute a significant percentage of the displaced population and face heightened risks of violence, exploitation, and malnutrition. The physical trauma experienced by Sudanese refugees is immense. Many have suffered injuries from the fighting, while others are struggling with malnutrition and disease. Access to healthcare is severely limited, with many hospitals and clinics either closed or overwhelmed. The lack of clean water and sanitation facilities further exacerbates the spread of infectious diseases. Pregnant women and children are dying in shocking numbers due to lack of medical supplies. Beyond the visible physical suffering, the psychological trauma inflicted on Sudanese refugees is profound and far-reaching. Many have witnessed or experienced violence, including the deaths of family members, sexual assault, and the destruction of their homes. Children are particularly vulnerable, as they may have been separated from their families, recruited into armed groups, or exposed to traumatic events. Mental health challenges such as PTSD, anxiety, and depression are increasingly common among refugees, yet access to mental health services is limited. The psychological toll of displacement threatens to undermine not only individual well-being, but also entire communities, as untreated trauma hampers recovery and resilience. Women are at heightened risk of gender-based violence, with many resorting to survival sex in exchange for basic necessities. The loss of education for children is also a major concern, with millions of school-age children deprived of access to formal education. Aid organizations like Doctors Without Borders and UNHCR are working to provide medical care, humanitarian assistance, and protection to Sudanese refugees. However, the scale of the crisis is overwhelming, and there is a dire need for increased funding and support from the international community. Obstacles to humanitarian aid delivery, including deliberate obstruction by the government of Sudan, further complicate the response efforts. The UN estimates that millions of people in Sudan are at risk of gender-based violence. The conflict has generated a massive increase in cases of killing, sexual violence, and recruitment of child soldiers. The ongoing conflict in Sudan has created a humanitarian catastrophe of historic proportions. The deliberate targeting of civilians, combined with the use of starvation, sexual violence, and displacement as weapons of war, is creating a crisis that demands urgent action. The international community must not look away from Sudan's suffering, but rather establish a roadmap to ensure that displaced persons can rebuild their lives in dignity and safety. The social fabric is being torn apart under the weight of starvation, trauma, and repeated displacement, and without urgent action, the damage to Sudanese society may be irreparable. When families are forced to flee a war zone, they naturally expect the world to provide sanctuary and safety. However, in these remote desert camps located in Chad, the very foundations of life, including basic necessities and infrastructure, are rapidly crumbling, leaving countless individuals in a precarious state. A staggering 86% of the refugees who remain in these camps are women and children, highlighting a profound demographic imbalance. They are often left entirely alone, navigating an incredibly harsh and unforgiving landscape, struggling to survive without adequate resources or support systems. The most basic necessity for human survival, water, has tragically become a weapon turned against them in this crisis. Each person in these camps must survive on approximately 9 liters of water per day, a dangerously low amount that barely sustains life. To put this into critical context, the minimum recommended amount of water for survival, basic sanitation, and essential hygiene is at least twice that quantity, ranging from 15 to 20 liters per person daily. This stark difference means that every single drop of water is a constant battle for existence and health. The hunger in these camps is not merely discomfort. It is acute and life-threatening. Famine conditions have already been officially confirmed in other camps, such as Zamzam in North Darfur, indicating the severe and widespread nature of this food crisis. Here in Chad, the diet for refugees is tragically limited, consisting of nothing more than a small amount of sorghum, cooking oil, and salt. These meager rations are handed out only once every 2 months, making sustained nutrition an impossible challenge for families. This severe and prolonged lack of adequate nutrition is directly driving a catastrophic health crisis across the camps. It is leading to a sharp and alarming rise in malnutrition rates and causing devastating complications, particularly for women during pregnancy, endangering both mothers and their unborn children. The ongoing crisis is not just impacting the present, it is actively stealing the future itself from an entire generation. More than 90% of Sudan's 19 million school-aged children currently have no access to any form of formal education, leaving their intellectual development and future prospects severely compromised. Consequently, an entire generation is losing its most critical asset, knowledge and the opportunity for learning, due to the relentless forces of war and forced displacement. Furthermore, children are disproportionately shouldering the heaviest burden of this escalating health crisis, facing severe and often fatal illnesses. As of early 2025, a deadly and rapidly spreading cholera outbreak had tragically infected over 32,000 people within these vulnerable communities. For the 3.2 million malnourished children under the age of 5 who are already severely weakened, contracting cholera is often a swift and unavoidable death sentence. The men who might typically feed and protect these families are frequently gone from the camps. They have either been killed, taken hostage, forcibly conscripted into fighting, or compelled to leave the camps in a desperate search for work in places like Libya or the distant capital of N'Djamena. This dire situation means that women are often left entirely alone, bearing the immense responsibility of caring for both the elderly and numerous children. They are forced to rely entirely on a severely broken and underfunded system of international aid, which is often insufficient to meet their overwhelming needs. What is lost in the dry recitation of statistics is the memory of what was. Beyond the numbers and reports, there lies a profound human experience, a past that shapes the present suffering. It is the echo of a life once lived with a sense of normalcy and self-sufficiency, now tragically out of reach for millions. Suhaiba Abdullah Abu Bakr, a mother caring for her severely malnourished son Sufyan, in the harsh realities of a refugee camp, remembers a profoundly different time. She recalls a life where her family could sustain themselves, a stark contrast to their current desperate circumstances. This memory of self-reliance highlights the immense loss experienced by those displaced by conflict. If we were at home, we could have adapted ourselves. You can go and grow crops. You can work to earn some money. But here, we're reliant on what we're given. Her words paint a vivid picture of the stark difference between a life of agency and one of utter dependence. The ability to cultivate land, to labor for wages, to provide for one's family has been cruelly taken away, replaced by a reliance on external aid that often falls short. The ability to provide for oneself, to adapt to challenges, to control one's own destiny, that is the fundamental dignity that has been violently stripped away from millions. This loss extends beyond material possessions. It is an erosion of self-worth and autonomy, leaving individuals feeling powerless and vulnerable in the face of overwhelming adversity. It is the profound human cost of conflict, where the very essence of being able to live and thrive independently is eradicated. The tragic truth is that this localized suffering, exemplified by the crisis in Sudan, is not an isolated incident, but a devastating symptom of a larger global disease, the alarming return of geopolitical chaos. This instability creates fertile ground for conflicts to fester and humanitarian crises to escalate, impacting millions of innocent lives. The interconnectedness of global events means that local tragedies often have roots in broader international failures. The World Economic Forum notes with grave concern that the global security order is so fragmented and fractured that world leaders are increasingly unable to negotiate or maintain peace. This breakdown in international cooperation and diplomacy leaves vulnerable populations exposed to unchecked violence and instability. The lack of a cohesive global response allows conflicts to rage on, with devastating consequences for civilians caught in the crossfire. This fragmentation creates total impunity for conflicts like the one currently devastating Sudan, where warring factions operate with little fear of international accountability. Underlying many of these escalating crises, including the one in Sudan, is the critical issue of resource scarcity, particularly water. As populations grow and climate change intensifies, competition for vital resources becomes a potent driver of conflict and displacement. Water is no longer just a shared resource essential for life. It has become a powerful tool of leverage in geopolitical struggles. We see this dangerous trend manifesting in the catastrophic risk of conflict over vital river systems, like the Mekong and Nile rivers, where upstream and downstream nations vie for control. The control of water resources can be a source of immense power, leading to heightened tensions and potential flashpoints between nations. And we saw the terrifying precedent set in April 2025, when India suspended the Indus Water Treaty with Pakistan, escalating a non-water security issue into an act of war threat over river flows. This alarming event demonstrated how resource disputes, particularly over water, can quickly spiral into major international confrontations, highlighting the fragility of peace in regions where water is a critical and contested commodity. Such actions underscore the urgent need for robust international frameworks to manage shared resources peacefully. The RSF paramilitaries in Sudan claim they are fighting against corrupt elites, attempting to legitimize their brutal actions. However, the refugees who have endured unimaginable suffering know the devastating truth of the violence firsthand. Their experiences expose the hollow rhetoric of the warring factions, revealing the true cost of conflict borne by innocent civilians. The reality on the ground is far removed from the political narratives. Aza Dahia Osman, an elderly woman struggling with severe hypertension, has spent 2 agonizing years searching for basic chronic medicine that simply does not exist in the remote, underserved camps where she now resides. Her desperate search for essential medication highlights the catastrophic collapse of healthcare infrastructure and the profound neglect faced by those displaced. This lack of access to fundamental medical care is a daily struggle for survival for many. Her voice, filled with conviction and pain, echoes the sentiments of many. They are liars. There's nothing to believe. They are the ones who killed us. We cannot live under them. These powerful words convey the deep distrust and anger felt by those who have been betrayed and brutalized by the very forces that claim to represent them. It is a raw testament to the profound human cost of conflict and the complete erosion of faith in authority. This profound lack of control, this total vulnerability, is the heartbreaking realization of what has been irrevocably lost. Not just a home, but the fundamental power to live and die with dignity. It is the ultimate indignity, to be stripped of agency and forced to endure unimaginable hardship without the basic human right to self-determination. The struggle to regain this dignity is a testament to the enduring human spirit, even in the face of overwhelming despair. But even in the deepest despair, amidst unimaginable hardship and loss, the human spirit endures with remarkable strength. Survival itself becomes a profound act of defiance, a testament to an unyielding will to live and overcome the most challenging circumstances. Maka and her mother Ash endured a harrowing 2-month hospital stay, a period filled with uncertainty and fear. They relied completely on the heroic yet severely overstretched medical staff, who, despite their limited resources, approached every single case as an urgent emergency, dedicating themselves to saving lives in the face of overwhelming odds. Afaf Abdul Malik, a woman who tragically lost her brother-in-law, channels her profound memory of home and a life once lived by meticulously cultivating a tiny garden. Using cuttings she carefully finds, this fragile patch of green serves as a poignant and resilient reminder of the stability and beauty they once knew. A small act of hope in a harsh landscape. In the profound absence of a functioning political system or adequate governmental support, it is the local initiatives and the sheer unwavering determination of individuals and communities that step forward. They courageously fill the critical gaps, providing essential services and support where official structures have failed, demonstrating incredible self-reliance and collective action. The profound tragedy of this situation is that the rest of the world, often preoccupied by its own internal fragmentation and geopolitical concerns, is demonstrably failing to meet this basic inherent human resilience. This global oversight leaves countless individuals struggling without the support they desperately need to survive and rebuild their lives. Despite this unfolding crisis being widely recognized as the 21st century's worst humanitarian disaster, the international community has, regrettably, not delivered on its promises or responsibilities. The collective response has fallen far short of what is urgently required to address the immense suffering and displacement. In the year 2024, UN agencies operating in Chad received only 69% of the international funding that was critically needed to address the escalating humanitarian crisis. This significant shortfall in financial support severely hampered their ability to provide essential aid and services to millions of vulnerable people. Alarmingly, aid cuts implemented by Western nations are already worsening an already dire situation, pushing vulnerable populations further into hardship. Refugees like Suhaiba have directly experienced the devastating impact of these cuts, as their basic food distributions have been drastically reduced, leaving them on the brink of starvation and increasing their food insecurity. In a world where conflicts are at an all-time high, and where geopolitical tensions are increasingly driven by complex geoeconomic confrontation and fierce resource competition, the most critical choice for humanity is not made in the secure confines of a bunker or a strategic war room. It is made elsewhere, with far-reaching consequences. Instead, the most critical choice is made in the quiet, often overlooked indifference of the international community. This collective inaction and lack of urgent response allows suffering to persist and crises to deepen, highlighting a profound moral failure on a global scale. The individual stories of suffering and resilience are crucial. Maka's agonizing journey to safety, Afaf's traumatized niece struggling to cope, and Aza's desperate, urgent need for life-saving medicine. These are not just isolated incidents. They are the deeply human faces behind the overwhelming and often impersonal statistics of this crisis, each representing immense personal struggle and hope. These poignant individual stories serve as a stark and powerful reminder that the ongoing collapse of the global security order carries a terrifyingly high human price. It is a price paid in shattered lives, lost futures, and unimaginable suffering, underscoring the urgent need for collective action and stability. For these displaced communities, the war, in its conventional sense, is over here. However, the fight now is for their very survival, a daily struggle for food, shelter, and safety. More profoundly, it is also a fight for our shared humanity, a test of our collective compassion and responsibility to those in desperate need. Behind every single headline, every news report, and every statistic, there are countless human lives, each with their own unique and deeply personal story of struggle, loss, and resilience. These individual narratives are vital to understanding the true scope and impact of the crisis. The only truly effective way to halt this devastating spiral of fragmentation and despair is to actively stop forgetting them. We must remember their stories, acknowledge their suffering, and commit to providing the support and solutions they desperately need to rebuild their lives and restore their dignity.